ever feel like the more we progress, the more kind of lost we get?
Yeah.
It's like we're reaching for something, but we're not quite sure what it is.
Right.
That's kind of the heart of what Karen Armstrong is getting at in her book,
Mm-hmm.
The Battle for God, A History of Fundamentalism.
Yeah.
It's a deep dive into how this pursuit of scientific progress, the stuff that's supposed to make our lives better, sometimes kind of leaves us yearning for something more.
That's right.
But hey, before we get into all that, let me tell you about Mindful Moments.
Okay.
It's our brand new channel where you can get like these bite-sized pieces of wisdom from incredible books, just like this one, narrated by, get this, AI.
Whoa.
Perfect for when you're on the go and you want to nourish your mind.
That's amazing.
Yeah, check it out.
I will.
So back to Armstrong.
Okay.
She's got this fascinating take. She doesn't see fundamentalism as some relic of the past, right? It's it's just some old dusty thing. She reframes it as this direct response to the anxieties of our modern world, a world that's kind of shaped by what she calls logos.
Exactly. And logos for Armstrong.
Logos.
Yeah, logos represents this huge emphasis on reason and scientific progress that really emerged during the Enlightenment. And it's like this shift, right, that began to overshadow more traditional ways of understanding religion, ones that are rooted in mythos.
Mythos.
Yeah, I think myth, ritual, symbolism, that kind of stuff.
So it's as one goes up, the other goes down.
Yeah, it's like a seesaw.
Yeah, seesaw, okay.
As logos rises, mythos kind of starts to decline.
I got it.
And this tension, this push and pull, that's really at the core of Armstrong's argument.
Okay.
Thinkers like Spinoza, who was a big champion of secularism, and John Locke, who really emphasized reason and faith.
Okay.
They exemplify this move towards logos.
But, did everyone, buy into this whole logos thing?
Not necessarily. Even some deeply religious figures like Pascal felt a bit uneasy about it all.
Right.
He argued that a world kind of stripped of mythos, without mystery and awe, that would leave us feeling spiritually empty. He had this sense that modernity, with all its bells and whistles, wasn't just this straightforward story of progress. It was like a double-edged sword.
Okay.
It brought advancements, but it also created this sense of alienation, of loss.
And I imagine this feeling of kind of being adrift in a sea of change.
Yeah.
It probably hit certain communities harder than others.
Absolutely. Take the Jewish community, for example. Events like the Spanish Inquisition and the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Those were deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
They were forced to confront a world that felt increasingly hostile to their faith.
Right.
This upheaval led to movements like the Kabbalah, which offered a way to, find meaning in a world that seemed to have gone mad.
So it was like a search for answers in a time of just chaos.
Precisely. And similar anxieties were rippling through Christianity and Islam as well.
Oh, really?
In Egypt, figures like Muhammad Ali attempted to reform Islam and align it with modern thought. And in America, evangelical reform movements were grappling with the same tension between faith and a rapidly changing world.
So it seems like everyone was trying to, adapt to reconcile their beliefs with this new landscape.
Yes. And this is where fundamentalism enters the picture.
Interesting.
It provided a haven from the anxieties of modernity.
Okay.
With its emphasis on certainty and a return to traditional values, it offered a sense of security in a world that felt increasingly chaotic.
This was a reaction like circling the wagons in the face of change.
Exactly. And this is a key point that Armstrong makes. Fundamentalism isn't some ancient relic.
Right.
It's a distinctly modern phenomenon, born out of the unique pressures of a world grappling with rapid transformation. We see this in the rise of premillennialism in American Christianity, the emergence of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and the growth of Haredi Judaism.
So these movements offered a sense of belonging and purpose in a world that felt increasingly secular.
That's right. And this need to defend faith against secular forces led to what Armstrong calls the rise of religious ideology. Figures like Maududi, Qutb, and Khomeini emerged, advocating for theocracies, societies ruled by religious law, as a way to counter the perceived threat of secularism.
So it was a shift from defending faith to actively reshaping society according to religious beliefs.
Precisely. And this is where we see the dangers of literalism emerge.
Okay.
The tendency to interpret religious texts without nuance or context that can lead to extremism and violence.
So it becomes like a way to justify actions that might not be condoned in a purely spiritual context?
We see this in the Gush Emunim movement in Israel with its expansionist agenda, the upheaval of the Iranian Revolution, and the emergence of violent groups like Takfir wal-Hijra in Egypt.
So these are examples of how this literal interpretation of faith can have very real-world consequences.
Unfortunately, yes. And these movements were often fueled by a yearning for certainty and control in a world that felt increasingly unpredictable.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because now we're entering the postmodern era with its emphasis on multiple perspectives and the questioning of like grand narratives.
And this new way of thinking, it poses fresh challenges to fundamentalist worldviews. Thinkers like Abdul Karim Soroush in Iran, for example, they're advocating for a more nuanced understanding of faith and its relationship to the world.
So they're looking for a way to like bridge the gap between the spiritual and the secular without resorting to extremism.
And this is where Armstrong's analysis becomes so crucial.
Right.
She argues that understanding fundamentalism requires us to understand the anxieties and yearnings that drive it, not just the actions that result from it.
It's about looking beyond the surface and trying to grasp the deeper forces at play.
And to do that, we need to delve deeper into the historical context that shaped these movements.
Let's do it. So to understand how modernity itself contributed to the rise of fundamentalism. Armstrong takes us back to 16th century Spain.
Okay.
I mean, Spain at that time, it was like...
It was a fascinating time.
Yeah.
Fascinating microcosm of all these changes happening across Europe, really. I mean, they were at the forefront of exploration.
Yeah.
You know, Ferdinand and Isabella financing Columbus's voyages. Right. But at the same time, they were establishing the Spanish Inquisition to maintain religious unity and control.
That seems like kind of contradictory, right?
Yeah.
Embracing exploration and progress while simultaneously clamping down on dissent.
Exactly. And that's Armstrong's point. The road to modernity, it wasn't all smooth sailing, you know?
Right.
It wasn't this straightforward path.
Yeah.
The Spanish Inquisition, as brutal as it was, it was part of their project to create this modern absolute state.
Oh, okay.
And they saw religious dissent as a threat to that unity.
And for the Jewish community, I mean, this was a time of just immense upheaval.
Absolutely.
Right.
Culminating in their expulsion from Spain in 1492.
It's crazy.
And this experience of exile and persecution, it really had a profound impact on their understanding of faith.
Okay.
It led to the rise of the Kabbalah, particularly the Lurianic Kabbalah, which offered this mystical way to kind of grapple with trauma and find meaning in suffering.
So it was a way to find spiritual answers to questions that logic and reason couldn't fully address.
Precisely. The Kabbalistic myth, even if not taken literally, it provided a framework for processing pain and connecting to a deeper reality.
This kind of reminds me of Spinoza,
yeah,
who directly challenged traditional religious beliefs and was ultimately excommunicated from the Jewish community.
Spinoza is a key figure here because he championed reason above all else, even in matters of faith. He called for a secular democratic state.
Wow.
Ideas that were pretty radical for his time, really.
Yeah.
His story echoes contemporary debates about the role of faith in public life, even today.
It shows that this tension between faith and reason, it's not new.
No.
It's been brewing for centuries.
Yeah.
And then we have the Sabbatine movement.
Right.
Another fascinating example of how messianic expectations can take hold, particularly in times of upheaval.
The Sabbatine movement, with Sabbatai Zevi declaring himself the Messiah, it tapped into this deep yearning that people had for a savior, for someone to make sense of all the chaos in the world.
But ultimately, it ended in disappointment. Right?
Yeah, unfortunately it did. But this wasn't just about religious fervor, though. It was about social and political anxieties as well. People were searching for answers, for a way to regain a sense of control in a world that felt increasingly unstable.
This search for control for certainty in an uncertain world.
Yeah.
It's a theme that runs through the entire book, really.
It does.
It helps us understand why fundamentalist movements, which often reject modernity, ultimately utilize modern tools and ideologies to achieve their aims.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It is.
And this theme, it takes us into the Islamic world, specifically the Ottoman Empire, which was also facing its own set of challenges.
So just as Europe was experiencing its own transformation, the Islamic world was grappling with its own set of pressures.
Exactly. The once mighty Ottomans, they were facing internal strife and the growing influence of the West.
Right.
This led to a period of intense questioning and a desire to reconcile traditional beliefs with the pressures of a changing world. Thinkers like Muhammad Abduh and Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani emerged, calling for a revival of Ittihad, the Islamic principle of independent reasoning.
So they were encouraging Muslims to think for themselves, to engage with the world in a new way.
Yes, and it's important to note, this wasn't about abandoning faith. It was about finding a way to make it compatible with the modern world. But this tension between tradition and modernity, between faith and reason, it would ultimately set the stage for the rise of fundamentalism as a reaction against the perceived threats of secularization.
And this is where we see the 20th century kind of take shape, right? With the rise of religious ideology.
Exactly.
And figures like Maududi, Qutb, and Khomeini, who advocate for theocracies as a way to counter the influence of secularism.
Precisely. But before we delve into those figures, it's essential to understand how these movements gained traction and the anxieties that they tapped into.
Let's explore that further then. So how do these thinkers like Soroush, how do they kind of navigate this whole tension between faith and the postmodern world?
Well, Soroush, he's an Iranian intellectual, and he advocates for a much more nuanced understanding of this relationship between Islam and the West. He really challenges that simplistic binary that fundamentalists often present, right? This whole us versus them, good versus evil thing.
It's got to be more than that.
Exactly. He argues for a more critical and self-aware approach to Islamic thought. One that acknowledges the complexities of history and the validity of diverse perspectives.
So it's about moving beyond those rigid interpretations and embracing a more open and dialogical approach to faith.
Exactly. Soroush really emphasizes the importance of ijtihad. Remember that Islamic principle of independent reasoning?
Right.
He sees that as a way to engage with contemporary challenges and reinterpret religious texts in light of, new knowledge and social reality.
So keeping it relevant.
Yeah, he sees it as essential for Islam to remain relevant and vibrant in the modern world.
This kind of resonates with what we were talking about earlier with Muhammad Abduh and his call for reform within Islam. It seems like there's this through line here, this struggle between those who cling to those rigid interpretations, and those who are looking for a more dynamic and evolving understanding of faith.
You've hit on a crucial point there. Armstrong's book, it highlights this ongoing tension within all three Abrahamic faiths, really. It's a battle for the soul of religion itself. It's this question of how to remain faithful to tradition while also adapting to the ever-changing realities of the modern world.
And it's a battle with profound implications for all of us, really.
It is.
Regardless of our personal beliefs. The rise of fundamentalism, it's not just a religious phenomenon. It's a social, political, and cultural force.
It touches everything.
Yeah, it shapes our world in really profound ways.
And understanding its roots, the anxieties, the yearnings that fuel it, that's essential for navigating the complexities of the 21st century.
I got to move beyond those simplistic labels.
Absolutely.
And really engage with those deeper questions that drive people to seek meaning and certainty, even in extreme ways.
It's about understanding the human condition, really.
So where does this all leave us? What are we supposed to do with all these insights?
Well, Armstrong, she doesn't offer easy answers, but she provides this framework for understanding these complex issues, right? She urges us to move beyond condemnation.
Okay.
And engage in a more empathetic and nuanced dialogue.
So it's not about just dismissing fundamentalism as irrational or dangerous.
Right.
It's about trying to understand those underlying factors that contribute to its appeal.
We need to recognize that the battle for God, as Armstrong frames it, it's ultimately a battle for the human heart and mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a battle we can only win through understanding, compassion, and a willingness to engage with the complexities of our world.
This deep dive it's been a real eye-opener, I gotta say.
Yeah.
Challenging my own assumptions and providing a fresh perspective on a topic that often feels, polarizing and kind of overwhelming.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Right.
To really grasp the depth and complexity of Armstrong's analysis, I highly encourage you to pick up a copy of The Battle for God, A History of Fundamentalism.
Yeah, it's a book that'll stay with you.
It will, long after you finish it.
Absolutely.
And don't forget, if you're looking for those bite-sized pieces of wisdom on the go, be sure to check out our friends over at Mindful Moments.
Yeah.
Their AI-narrated channel, it distills brilliant books, just like this one, into insights you can carry with you,
Yeah.
Nourishing your mind wherever you are.
It's great.
Share this episode with your friends, your family, your colleagues.
Yes.
Continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Let's work together to create a world where understanding and empathy triumph over division and fear.
Beautifully said.
And for those who want to dive deeper into this book, you can find a link to purchase it in the show notes.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the battle for God.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep seeking knowledge
Yes.
and challenging your assumptions.
Absolutely.